Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderwoman Sanye,
Present.
Alderman Browning, Chair Clark Hubbard,
Here.
Alderman Cone.
Present.
We have 5 present. You have a quorum.
All right, with that, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, January 17th, 2024.
Second.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderman Browning, Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
We have 5 aye votes.
Great, with that, we've approved the minutes. We're going to rearrange the agenda a bit out of courtesy for our guests since our board bill sponsor is on the committee. We traditionally do this. So with that, we're going to move forward with item number 1, the city's strategic land use plan presentation.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Rowe, the Executive Director of the Planning and Urban Design Agency. I confirm that I will tell the truth. Happy to be here today. Glad that you're both here in person and virtually. I have a really lead role of just introducing and preparing you for the whole team that will make a presentation. This is an important moment in the planning work and the solidity of the planning work. So we refer to as the strategic City of St. Louis Strategic Land Use Plan update. The current one has been in force since 2005. Pleased that there are 2 members of the HUD's committee that are on the Planning Commission familiar with that. And so, as I've confirmed, I'll tell you the truth, I've been around for a while. You all know that. So our mission is to give you a effective but brief presentation and be available for questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Miriam Keller, who is a city planning executive with the Planning Division of the Planning and Urban Design Agency, who will go through part of the presentation and have other members of the consulting team assist with that. So, Miriam?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman and members of the committee. So as Don described, just want to, we really value this time with you here to kind of present an overview of what the strategic land use plan process is, what it's all about, and then also the types of things we're hearing from the public so far, to update you on the themes that are emerging in the process and let you know a little bit about what to expect next as this process proceeds. How's my audio? Am I? Okay. Can Alderman Cone only hear if I speak into the mic, or can he hear into the mic? Okay. Well, I'll just keep a distance from this mic and proceed unless it's very distracting. It might be. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Oh, great. Oh, thank you so much. Great. So here's just a quick outline of what we wanted to share today. So just an overview of what is the strategic land use plan or comprehensive plan, about the process, a little bit more the structure for community engagement and community involvement, and to introduce in full the planning team that we have helping us with this effort. And then, like I mentioned, what we've heard so far through community engagement, and then where this process is leading next. And also, I didn't want to leave this presentation without talking about some of the policy and regulatory implementation ideas that, including zoning, that this process is designed specifically to inform. So to begin, and I know that all members of this committee are either members of the Planning Commission or we've had the opportunity to sort of brief you one-on-one on this process. So this is I know for committee members, a little bit of review, but for those joining from home, wanted to provide just an overview of what these terms mean: comprehensive plan, strategic land use plan. How does this fit together? So a comprehensive plan is, think of it as a policy guide for a city's evolution. It's actually authorized under Missouri state law that cities create these for this purpose, and it's also in our local code. The idea of a comprehensive plan to guide zoning policy, review of redevelopment plans, and really to be, again, just a policy guide to inform land use decisions that a city makes. So some other ways to think about it, it's really sort of a community-driven basis for policies that shape a city's evolution, a high-level plan. It's maybe think of it as a plan of plans with a very long-term planning horizon. Think 2040 or 2050, and a long-term vision that can be sort of the continual foundation for land use policy making. And again, for viewers at home, all zoning changes and redevelopment plans are actually legally required to be reviewed against a comprehensive plan for compliance. So a comprehensive plan really does play an active role day to day in shaping and guiding land use policy. So procedurally, this review specifically happens at the Planning Commission before then recommendations about zoning changes, whether that's a rezoning or a zoning text amendment, are then sent to the Board of Aldermen for their consideration. Wanted to take a step back and kind of put this current effort in a little bit of a historical context. So, of course, there have been citywide plans, land use plans made throughout the city's history. I think the first formal one being created actually in 1907, a major comprehensive planning effort in the 40s, actually in 1975, an effort at creating a citywide plan, and then in 2005, the current strategic land use plan, which the city uses today, was created. The strategic land use plan created in 2005 was just a huge step forward for the city in sort of reforming a long-range planning vision for the city. So this is kind of the element of the comprehensive plan that we have today, that we use today. Even though it was created in 2005, it's been amended 25 times, so it's still very much that current planning document used day to day by planning staff in reviewing potential land use policy like zoning and redevelopment plans. I also wanted to take a step back with this history because I know it's not lost on members of this committee or members of the public that the planning field and also planning in the city of St. Louis has had, has done some harm. Disinvestment choices of the urban renewal area, all of that guided by planning, right? And so wanted to make clear that in this planning process, we are trying to sort of have this future vision grounded in an understanding of this history and really affirmatively root this process in equity and resilience and quality of life, with an understanding that, in fact, there are planning decisions from the last century that now we have a responsibility to recognize and address and correct as a city. So a quick overview of St. Louis's current strategic land use plan, this land use element of the comprehensive plan. I actually forgot to bring up the document that we use today. It's actually right here. It folds out into a description of these 10 different land use category designations. You can see them here on the slide, and then each of these are described in the plan. And by described, I mean, the vision for the future land use that each of these entails is described briefly in the plan and then mapped onto the city roughly at a block by block level. And so that's what you see on the right. So that is the strategic land use plan today. This is the document or element of the comprehensive plan that we are currently updating through the strategic land use plan update process, but want to put this in context a little bit of what that actually means relative to a comprehensive plan, which can have other elements. So while the land use element is really like a core central piece of a comprehensive plan, of course, there can be other elements like transportation mobility. Like, as members of this committee know, that the city is embarking also on a process to create a citywide transportation mobility plan. Some portion of that will actually be created as a supplement or an element of the city's comprehensive plan. Similar with a sustainability plan update, the aspiration is that that plan or a portion thereof is also added to our comprehensive plan as an element of the comprehensive plan. And of course, maybe there are future elements that we want to add in the future, housing, even parks, and then also neighborhood plans adopted, and as more are created, are adopted as kind of supplements to the comprehensive plan, a little bit more of a fine-grained, fine brush drill down or detail in a specific neighborhood geography that fits into the comprehensive plan, but is a more detailed layer on top of it. And, of course, as its diagram implies, and as the term comprehensive implies, all of these things really need to talk together, relate to one another, and be mutually reinforcing. So as a planning staff, that will be sort of among our missions over the next couple of years as we're building out this constellation of elements of a comprehensive plan. This slide, I wanted to address what I think can be a misconception in the public, that the strategic land use plan or a land use plan is just a map. Really, it is not just a map. It has all of these elements that is informed by and that it is inclusive of. So analysis of existing conditions and opportunities, our team will describe a little bit of that work underway. So really using data to inform the conversation, goals and visions that are shaped by community input, specific strategies to advance the goals and vision that are outlined in the plan. In this update in particular, we want to focus on a very clear visualization of the intent of land use goals and best practices, and implementation recommendations. A key element of those, and I'll return to this at the end of the presentation, is very specific guidance on changes to our zoning code that need to be made in order for this plan to be implemented through regulation. And then the map pulls this all together. So with that, I will hand this mic over to Jen Bolstad of Interboro Partners, who will share a little bit more about the process and where we are.
Thanks, Miriam. I'm Jennifer Bolstad. I'm the project manager for the consultant team that's working on this effort. I'm with Interboro Partners based in New York. We are joined by a lot of other teaming partners. This is a big effort, and so we are looking firms that have local knowledge rooted here in St. Louis, and then to firms that we've brought into the process who have a more national eye on best practices. So throughout this process, that's what we've been trying to do, is to match up what we're seeing on the ground, what we're hearing from your community, what we're hearing from residents of St. Louis, with things that we know about planning and these kinds of efforts nationwide. Miriam touched on this. There are multiple phases in this process, so it's not simply updating and creating this map. There are a lot of steps that go into this. Thus far, we've completed a preparation phase. We are nearing the tail end of a deep analysis phase, and that will springboard us into a phase where we can really start envisioning what the big goals are for this plan. And following directly from that, we'll be updating those categories that Miriam mentioned, those 10 different land use categories. We don't know if there'll be 10, there'll be 50. We're going to customize those categories of ways we use land in St. Louis to the things that we're hearing from your community, your residents, all of you, about how land should best be used to strategize to meet those goals that we're setting together. We'll then go into updating the map itself, and in the final stage, we'll think through ways that we can implement and operationalize this. So this is a kind of broad overview of the structure of all of the players that we're gathering input from, using as a sounding board, and who are participating in the process. So the Planning Commission kind of sits above this whole effort and will have the final authority to adopt or amend this plan. Planning and Urban Design Agency, so Don and Miriam's group, are the direct stewards of this process. I represent the consultant team. And we have assembled a steering committee composed of residents who will be guiding this process and act as a kind of sounding board for major decisions and forks in the road as we go through it. And then we're gathering a whole lot of input from the community, from the public themselves, which my colleague and teammate Liz will be telling you more about in depth. And then we've also convened a series of working groups. Now, earlier you heard Miriam talk about those three kind of pillars that represent the big vision for this plan: quality of life, improving resilience, improving equity. And so the working groups that we've convened are composed of agency and organization representatives who have a hand in each of those aspects of life in St. Louis, rather than putting them in the kind of traditional silos. So we're drawing on their expertise on how things actually can get implemented and become operationalized, within the purview of those ways that they normally work, but rather than assembling them kind of under their normal umbrellas of transportation, housing, we're mixing them up into these groups that are uniquely tailored to this larger vision, and in fact, the reason that this plan so dearly needs an update. I'm going to turn it over to Liz Kramer, who's going to talk to you about the engagement process.
Thank you. Hello, Alder people. Lovely to see you all. So I want to talk just a little bit about what public engagement has been so far and what we've learned. We have a wide variety of methods that we're using. We're expecting public engagement will continue through June of this year. That has included asking people about what are the things that have potential in St. Louis, what are the things that work well, how do we learn about what is successful in the city and what things change. So we've done that through a survey that's been out for the last couple of months. We've also been doing walking tours. We unfortunately had a tour canceled yesterday, perhaps for safety reasons, where we've been visiting neighborhoods and understanding what are some of the ways that that conditions exist on the ground, who is experiencing that. We've also done a variety of workshops. We have a public workshop this evening at Mission St. Louis from 5 to 7 p.m. Those workshops are incredibly interactive and really prompting people to speak from their own experience. They are experts here as residents in St. Louis, and so we're learning from them. And in this next round of engagement in particular, we'll be asking folks to think with us about some of the really challenging tensions that exist across St. Louis. We also have a steering committee, which Jen mentioned. We have 12 members of the public who are participating in that. It's an incredibly diverse group of people from across all of St. Louis. Wide range of different ages, some very new residents, some very long-term, lifelong residents. We met with them last night and had some really incredible discussions, hearing the things that they raised up from their experiences. We're also doing pop-ups, so we'll be doing, especially later this month, we'll be out in the community at events, in public. And then, as Jen mentioned, we have 3 working groups that are addressing these major themes and outcomes that we want to see happen across St. Louis. We also have an Instagram. You can follow us at sloop_STL, a great way to see what's happening in engagement and across the process. And there's a website, which I think you all have seen, that has extensive information on it. And I believe you just got a copy of the newsletter, and we brought some extra copies if you want some to bring to your own ward meetings or other things that you have going on. This is the first edition. We'll have a number of these coming out over the next couple of months that will continue to expand the kind of public education and awareness about what the strategic land use plan is. We also give you all some posters. Please put those up where you feel like you want to. And we have a number of business cards also as a way to kind of get people connected and engaged. So what have we been hearing? So in our first round of engagement, we spoke with over 400 people. There were 17 themes that emerged and over 50 insights within those themes. I'm not going to go into them in depth right now, but I'll give you an example of one. And then we also had a number of tensions that came up, and those tensions were both in narrative and in action. I'll give you a more specific example of how that has played out, and talk about how we're using these in the next round of engagement. So just to give you an example of what one of these themes are, we've heard that creating spaces to build strong communities and relationships is a really big overarching theme. And a very specific insight within that is that residents recognize and value the diversity in their communities, and they want to see their residential and commercial spaces reflect and encourage that diversity. So this is just a few things that we've heard from people broadly about this theme. What we've been doing with the steering committee and the working groups yesterday and today is thinking about how these themes connect to each other as we evolve them, and those will then lead into what are the goals, what are the strategies that we move forward with this plan. And then to give you an example of how these tensions are working, one example that I'm sure you all are familiar with is making plans for current residents versus making plans for future potential residents or visitors. People really feel that there is a tension and a conflict between those two priorities. So in this next round of engagement, we're spending time digging into those tensions and understanding more specifically how does that show up in land use in St. Louis, and how can we figure out how to address that? What's that really mean for us? And part of this is also a series of pieces of a vision that is emerging. These are just a couple of the categories that are starting to come up. We will be launching a survey in the next couple of weeks to seek more feedback and prioritization from the public about what that vision is for land use and development, and how we expect to see that manifest. I'm going to hand it back to Jen to talk just a little bit about the existing conditions.
Thanks, Liz. So as Liz said, we're really using the expertise that's inherent in this community to learn what's best for St. Louis. And we're matching that expertise that our team has at understanding land use processes and best practices at the national scale. So part of what we've been doing, in addition to a lot of listening, is taking a look at what we see on the ground. So we've created lots and lots of maps. We've done a deep dive into various issues that impact land use, including the land use history, as Miriam mentioned, both the high points and the low points of the legacy of land use in St. Louis, looking at vacancy, which is obviously a very big topic and really shapes how we think about the future of the city and how we use land. Looking at hydrology and flood risk and understanding the inherent vulnerabilities and opportunities that St. Louis has to make a place that's better protected. Another piece of the analysis process has been looking at this document, understanding its strengths and weaknesses, understanding what really needs to be a priority when we update it. And I'm joined by some of my teammates from Code Studio. They are national experts in translating these kinds of ideas into zoning. And so a big piece of this is going to be making the update of this specific enough that it's actionable. And that includes setting us up to understand how we can best put these changes into zoning and what kinds of allied policies and other changes, other planning efforts need to accompany the update of the SLOOP so that it becomes actionable. Some of the things that we learned from our review of this plan are that it could be much more visual and accessible. It could be a much more public-facing document so that people feel better engaged and better educated about land use rather than these kind of just suddenly landing on them and impacting their communities out of the clear blue sky. It could connect, as I said, more seamlessly to zoning so that there's a direct relationship between the large-scale ambitions of this plan and the nuts and bolts of how we see that play out in buildings in our communities. It can encourage mixed use, allow more types of housing, promote better built form, potentially discourage suburban and non-dense development types, and it can directly incorporate these ideals of economic justice and sustainability within the way we're thinking about land use, bring in preservation policies, and connect to a strategy for how we deal with publicly controlled properties. And I'm going to turn it back to Liz to talk about some upcoming events that we hope you will also promote.
Great, thank you. So I think I mentioned we have a public workshop tonight, Mission St. Louis. And we have a number of virtual public workshops next week. And so some of you are already aware, we are really excited to get into these topics. Each of the virtual public workshops will take 2 tensions and go into a little bit more depth with them, but the workshop tonight will cover all 5 tensions that we're exploring. And do you want to talk a little bit about what's next? Do you want me to cover this? Okay, so as we move through this, we're going to continue to be exploring these visions and goals and moving into the detailed descriptions of land use as well as strategies. So you'll see some upcoming public workshops in March, as well as the survey that I previously mentioned. And that next public workshop, you can hold the dates for these March 19th and May 14th, 5 to 7 p.m. I believe we'll be going to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard's neighborhood for the March workshop. So we're really looking forward to continue to engage with the public in more depth on these topics.
So I mentioned this at the beginning, but didn't want to leave this presentation without talking about how this process that's underway now relates to the idea of a comprehensive update of the zoning code, or we've been using the term zoning code overhaul as a shorthand for that work. So a comprehensive plan, once it's formally adopted, of course, can be put to use many different ways. In addition to just in an ongoing way, the way we are legally required to use it as a city to inform zoning policy and redevelopment plans. So a couple of types of ways to think about implementation I've laid out on this slide. Of course, inspiring action. We hope naturally that a unified vision will be a very useful one for the St. Louis community. Shaping land use regulation, of course, so the zoning code overhaul and preservation policies. Guiding public investment, I think that is most likely to be directly informed by the citywide transportation and mobility plan that will become an element of the comprehensive plan. And informing other policies, maybe particularly the sustainability plan element of the comprehensive plan will give a lot of direct guidance in addition to the land use plan about environmental policies that may be worthwhile for the community to consider. But the zoning code overhaul, here's where it fits in this context of sort of modes of implementation or ways to think about implementation. So this current planning process, we're targeting completion by the end of 2024, and a zoning code overhaul could begin, really immediately after that. I know you all have, as part of the consideration of reappropriating ARPA funds, this possibility as a purpose, those funds could be obligated this year in preparation for this work to begin next year. And as Jen mentioned, and she alluded to our colleagues from Code Studio, this process is designed really to give us very direct insight into basically a roadmap for how to approach that overhaul of the zoning code. So with that, I was interested in questions members of the committee have.
I'm not coming up to ask you questions. I'll help.
Right. When you got up, I said that he wanted to say before we open it up for questions. Are you just getting up to answer questions? I have to be prepared for you, Don. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time out. Thank you for this presentation. One of the blessings in this position is the education that I've gotten around zoning between this committee and the planning commission, and the background, the history of it, the way it's been used, and in some ways misused here in the city of St. Louis. And I'm excited about this opportunity for this overhaul, to be able to right some wrongs and be able to just have a greater impact as we move forward in trying to promote development in the city of and so I want to also compliment the engagement. I myself have engaged on Instagram, shared that, and the pictures and everything. They don't even speak to the again the impact the community engagement would have on a plan like this because again most people don't really I didn't really understand it until I was able to be exposed to it this way and the importance of it. So with that, I'm going to open it up, of course, by seniority for questions from my colleagues. We'll start with Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to also extend my appreciation and thanks to the Planning Department for their efforts here. The only question that I have at the moment, though, Miriam or Don, either one of you, myself and Alderwoman Schweitzer, and I also do this with Alderwoman Velasquez, have town halls coming up, and I was wondering, would you be interested in joining us for one of those town halls? I think the next one that we have for the first and third wards is on April 20th.
Yeah, in short, very open and interested. Absolutely.
Great. I'll have to confer with my colleague from the first ward just to make sure that she's okay with that. But I think it would be great to have you come to our community and talk more about this loop. Thanks.
Yeah, wonderful.
Alderman, it may also be part of the local team of the consulting team that would attend.
That's fine by me.
And in the meantime, they do have the things that we can pass out within our community and our community engagement and our meetings and everything. And again, the shareable information that's immeasurable on social media. Alderwoman Slicer.
Thank you so much for coming to attend and for preemptively agreeing to come to our town hall on April 20th. We're excited to have you. I know there's some virtual and some in-person opportunities to participate coming up. Just for someone who's watching and maybe is interested in participating in government, but not quite sure what to expect, what would they be walking into or signing up for? Just to give them a little overview of what they might expect from this and what sort of things they'll be asked to consider.
Yeah, thank you, Alderwoman, for that question. So we know, I think to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard's comment, that this is a challenging and technical thing to think about. So in each engagement session, we give a little introduction about what is the strategic land use plan, but we've really framed the prompts and the questions that people will be engaging with about things that they experience. So thinking about things like what kinds of development that you see feels like it's serving you and your neighbors versus serving other people. Why? What is it about that? Another topic that we're addressing in this round is thinking about what makes things feel walkable or bikeable when we think about buildings and lots. So you don't have to know anything about mixed use buildings. You don't have to know any technical terms to be able to say, when I walk by a place that has big open windows, it feels more comfortable to me. When I walk in a place where there's street trees, it feels more comfortable to me. So we've really thought about what those experiences are like, and every single thing that folks can engage with, they're able to have an interactive component where they can do things on their own or have a conversation with someone to talk about what it is that's coming up for them as they think about these topics.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that question. And Miriam, I appreciate you coming again. And when we talked about this, we talked about the environmental component and sustainability issues and how it kind of underlines a lot of the work. And you mentioned a few different plans kind of coming together and this being a plan of plans. Can you give me any example of how you expect that to kind of play out in what this looks like?
Yeah, I think thinking about environmental issues specifically related to land use, there are maybe three that are jumping to mind right now. I think two relate to some of our greatest sort of climate vulnerabilities as a city, which are flood risk, from the river, but also surface flooding and extreme storm events and heavy rain events. So I think that is one major issue. Another is heat and extreme heat, and thinking about land uses, Pavement, of course, contributes to the urban heat island effect. A strong urban tree canopy and other uses, green uses of vacant land can really help mitigate that. So I think as we think about desirable future uses of land, those will be some of the direct considerations. I think a third that isn't directly related to climate vulnerability is urban agriculture, and thinking about all of the different forms that that can take, and considering sort of where and how that can complement other development and uses in the city, and then in follow-on work, reducing the regulatory barriers to those desired urban agriculture uses, which may be zoning and they may be other policies as well.
All good stuff, and all things that some other cities have been looking at, and we've been doing in sort of a fragmented effort, should have an opportunity to come together with this. So the zoning consultants that are here, for instance, the most recent map of the month that we've done as an informational thing is about flooding and flooding events in the city of St. Louis, whether it be from the Mississippi or the most recent stuff, and identifying it geographically. And some of that has some regulations that are sort of known, but not embraced. Other of the areas that we saw from the big rainfall are sort of new discoveries. And so that's an element that we're looking at. The sustainability plan has many, many factors of how to do things. In the past, when we've been embracing sustainability, we've had a lot of priorities. The most recent, the upcoming plan will be more focused on priorities. So it's an interesting and good opportunity to dovetail those things together.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that a lot, and I know that the transportation element is very much being included too. When I think about all the things you just said, there are times when this will be used, especially when you think about developments that are coming, and they may need to be kind of checked against this. But some of the things that we're talking about, which I think are so important within, sustainability and preparing for the very real climate future of the city, they're things that need to be more proactive. And unfortunately, so much of it is reactive. So I understand what you're saying with, transforming zoning, but when thinking about what we do as the government to make these things a reality and not just be reactive to a building coming in. I know we talked about the feasibility study of river to pair regreening efforts and conversation in my committee last month about that. But that takes so much from us, so how does that all line up instead of just being a reactive document?
Yeah, so good point. So sustainability is an activity, not just a plan and some words. So a little bit, my background is that I spent a substantial time a long time ago in Boulder, Colorado, where solar energy and sustainability things that were just getting nationwide treatment only a dozen years ago were happening 20 years back there. So the Sustainability Office, which is now housed within the Planning and Urban Design Agency, their task is to be educational, help form the plans, but be action oriented. And so one of the things that happens is many grants come our ways to be coordinated with SLDC and other departments. And some of those departments, part of our mission is to help bring them along to looking at sustainable options for how they do things. And that's the exciting part to all this.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, just maybe one specific example of how I think each of these things could dovetail to a sort of proactive shaping of capital investment. For example, land use, sustainability, and transportation mobility. I understand part of what will be considered in the transportation mobility plan process, which is led primarily by BPS, by the way, in coordination with the planning division. But BPS are, the real experts there, is thinking about standards for, when we have the opportunity to upgrade a street, what are the ways that we think about sort of green infrastructure as part of that system? So that might be tree planting, that might be ensuring that there is space for those trees to thrive and be healthy. And so, that has, of course, a land use component, a mobility component, also a sustainability component. But I think some of those standards can help guide and shape capital investment that the government does.
I'll add one more thing to actually the earlier question, is in the aspect of the tree canopy in the city. And you can see the effects geographically where the tree canopy is lax. And one thing that I forgot to mention is we've also been able to track health results or impacts on health because of things like the tree canopy being or the heat island effect occurring in some of our disinvested communities more than other places.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The overlapping nature, no pun intended, of our urban environment and how the rest of the city works can just not be overstated, with how we'll be able to survive as a city in the next 50 years, which I think, to your point about the plan being something that we are looking at for a long time, thinking about how St. Louis will evolve to meet that need. Yeah, I have a lot more questions. I'm sure I could spend all day talking to you all about this. I'm interested to see how the practice of what BPS brings to the table with their part of the plan works with planning in streets for us aldermen. I know I'm working on a few different business areas in the ward, and how does what they ask for from their developers match up with what the sloop is saying we should be asking for in the scope of work? That granular a thing will mean a lot when we're actually boots on the ground doing the day-to-day work to eventually meet this plan in 20 years, So I really appreciate it. Thank you for being so thoughtful, and thank you all for coming here today.
Thank you, Alderwoman Slicer. Alderman Brownie.
Thank you, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. This is not the first time I've seen you all, so you're doing a really good job of getting out there and getting this out and making sure everyone knows about the ongoing process. I'm a huge fan of the puns and the clever wordplay in your newsletters and social media items, and I think it's just a really effective way of getting out there and making sure that people know about this and how they can be involved. I have a town hall coming up with Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and I think our agenda is kind of full, but what we will take is some materials so that we can pass out, and then we'll certainly want to have you at a future event. I especially appreciate the citywide approach that we're looking at here. The name of the game in St. Louis is fragmentation, and it's the kryptonite that continues to keep us from reaching our full potential. Looking at everything from our land use to mobility and how it all connects, just is that next step helping us move away from that ward by ward approach, or that neighborhood by neighborhood approach. And I think we've all got examples in our wards of decisions that were made in the past that it looked advantageous at the time, but there was no overarching plan to look to. And now we look at that and say, boy, I really wish they hadn't put that industrial thing right there, or something like that. Similarly, how our streets connect and how everything connects together, it all needs to be looked at comprehensively. Really starting with the idea that we're going to ask people about their lived experiences is something I'm such a huge fan of, because we often ask the wrong questions of people. We ask people, what do you want to see in this? What should the zoning be here? As if a normal everyday citizen spends all their day thinking about that. But talking to people about where do you walk home from work, and what do you notice about that? Oh, most of your walk is not covered by shade. Okay, well, that's something we can take and put into this plan. That's the kind of thing that people can really speak to their experiences, and then it can go into informed documents like this. So I don't have any questions because I think my colleagues mainly covered my questions, but I just want to say I appreciate the effort so much, and I'm just going to look for all sorts of ways to get involved, including being there tonight at 5 p.m. at Mission St. Louis. So I'll see you then.
So our steering committee last night talked a lot about that walkability, meeting your neighbors and all those types of things. So And it's so important to think about us as a competitive place with the rest of the world. And think of things that we have as challenges, but some of those things are also assets. And historic architecture is part of the asset. The affordability is part of the asset. The change in employment structure of what's occurring in the city from being so much river-based to the more technology, all those things are assets. And the one that you mentioned is about urban agriculture is one of those things where we have a lot of vacant land and some individual activities that can be done on a block size, but it also can be an industry that is helping in sustainability for our population, work, and environmental matters, that you have to think about that as not just site by site, but citywide.
Great. I know that what you just said was what I meant when I was saying that it's going to make us a more marketable city for our team, our dream team here in SLDC, to be able to increase and improve development numbers here as we move our city forward. So you're saying your point about us being competitive with this work. I know zoning is not the sexiest work, but it's very important. And I know that many of our constituents' first exposure to zoning is when they're on the other side of it, right? On the appeal side of it. So this is really good work. And I will note that again, what you mentioned in your presentation about that line item in Board Bill 143 for the overhaul process, the overhaul planning for the zoning is important. All of this work is important. So again, thank you. Vice Chair Sanye.
Hi. Thank you all for being here today. I've gotten a chance to see you all in community too, so I'm just really happy too to see us making that extra effort to make sure that people understand, because I know these things are really complex. For me, I'm really excited, like the holistic view of the city, but also when I learned that the last time that we really revisited this was before desegregation. I think that says like we're overdue, and it's well past time for us to, take a look, because I think a lot of manifestations of that segregation and other forms of racism and disinvestment are still very much in these antiquated kind of old policies. So I'm very glad to hear that the city is working collectively and collaboratively to address that and bring us into 2024 and help make us a competitive city that really is a place for everyone.
So there are a lot of things in the city that are atrocious, old, outdated, and bad. So we need to turn into our flexibility to be advertising for ourselves and the good stuff. And some of our land use practices are the worst among them. So we're very conscious of that. And it's just one of the things that I do in invitation I get to Cambridge with a meeting with the Harvard Graduate School of Design, the Lincoln Institute, and my professional organization, is about 25 of us from big cities across the country do a little advertisement and a cocktail hour for planners and graduating planners. And she's one of them. That we talk and give a little pitch about where we're at. And the West Coast people just talk about all the excitement. And I strategically place myself as to when it's cocktail hour and say, no, that's great. Glad hear you doing that. But we want you as planners in St. Louis to be motivated to come here to help improve people's lives. It's not about curb cuts as improving people's lives. So thank you all.
All right, thank you. I did notice that President Green had joined the meeting on Zoom, and I want to see if she had any questions for you all prior to, okay.
Not at this time, but thank you so much. Oh, I see. I'm on here twice. Thank you so much. This was really informative. I got on here because for some reason, really grainy on my when I pulled it up on the YouTube link. So thanks.
All right, great. Well, thank you again. We'll be sure to share again about the meeting, the opportunity this evening to engage, and in the upcoming opportunities as well. Thank you. All right, and now we're prepared to move forward in the agenda to Board Bill 198. Vice Chair Sanye.
Okay, hello, members, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. Um, so, ta-da! I've been waiting to say that. It's called the Tax Accountability Development Act, Board Bill 198. It builds upon work that has happened prior to me being here from Alderman Cohn's Board Bill 64. Okay, so in essence, the simplest version of this bill, the simplest explanation is just this idea that I know many of us support already, that in order to get tax incentives, developers should be caught up on their own taxes. I think we've kind of experienced, especially those of you who have been serving before, kind of the processes that you have to go through if you get a project. Sometimes it can be either on SLDC or on the individual alder to kind of figure out what are the previous balances and what is the process to address those. And so I reached out with this idea of like, hey, we should probably just have a policy and an ordinance and a law just to make this a clear and standard process. And so at that point is when I began to reach out to SLDC, who had kind of already communicated with myself and some other folks as we've been through that they were interested in this, and also with the Collector of Revenue's office, since they have, a key role in anything that does with the payment of taxes and things like that. So essentially, one of the things that this bill does, it says that you have to be in good standing in order to get tax incentives. We define good standing as being not delinquent on payments. So essentially, you have to either not owe any taxes, be caught up, or you have to be on a payment plan for what you may owe. And then it also does make sure that you're not outstanding on your water bill or your trash bills or other type of city services. And so how will this work? So when you want to seek a tax incentive, you will go to the Collector of Revenue's office. You will submit to them a list of any real estate that you may own in whole or in part. You will submit to them any of your business entity names, any of your LLC, things like that. You will submit to them your federal tax identification number, so your TIN, your EIN, your social security number. And then you also can submit to them any lien waivers. So in case you somehow accrued taxes that were on the property before you took it and you need that waiver, you can start that process as well. And then you will take all of those receipts and that clearance that you get along with the affidavit of confirmation of taxes payment, and you will submit this package to SLDC or the decision making for the decision, but usually it's SLDC. And this bill makes this affidavit of confirmation for taxes paid as a required part of the process. So it's very similar to us when we want to get on the ballot, how we come. We get a form that says we're caught up in our taxes, and then we go to Board of Election Commissions to sign up to get on the ballot. It's very similar to that, but sort of a developer real estate version of that. I also do have Mr. Daly, the Collector of Revenue, was happy enough to join us. Mr. Richardson is here as well. We're not going to call for a vote today. We want to give you all a chance to ask any questions you have. I did send out a committee substitute, so I'm going to ask Madam Chair for the permission to officially adopt the committee substitute. And then also tomorrow morning or within the next 24 hours, I'm expecting some additional feedback too from the city councilor's office. So I would like to just call the vote next week when you all have the full, all the committee substitutes, all the amendments, all the feedback from all of the relevant parties. But at the same time, if you have any questions about it now, kind of about the general process, because that won't change much, you're welcome to kind of uplift it. And then we're just having some conversations behind the scenes about SLDC being a 501c4, and so kind of how to word their role within the process. So the amendments that you have make it so that we're not giving a directive to SLDC. We're giving directives to ourselves, and then we're giving directives to the developer to submit information to SLDC. Yes, and I don't know, Madam Chair, do you prefer for me to go ahead and ask to adopt that committee substitute, or do you want to start with?
We'll go ahead and do the adoption of the committee substitute.
I move that we adopt the committee substitute of Board Bill 1.
Second.
Did you have a question, Alderman Cone?
Yeah, I keep raising my hand. I'm not sure. It keeps going down.
Okay.
Not sure why. Just a point of order, point of clarification. So am I correct in understanding that the sponsor is planning on doing another committee substitute?
I think that the committee substitute and the amendments that we have today should be good, and we shouldn't have to do another committee substitute. But I just don't, since I have the amendments to make the changes, you all just got that. I want to go ahead and get that adopted, go out to sit from it. And then tomorrow, if after my discussions with the city councilor, anything needs to be changed, then I will do another committee substitute. But right now, I think that these changes should cover all of the bases.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye.
Aye.
Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
6 aye votes.
Okay. Okay, and then Madam Chair.
Point of clarification for the clerk. Did we need to suspend the rules to put the committee substitute in front of us due to an hour? We didn't get it 36 hours in advance.
Yes.
So I think we need to go back and redo that vote.
Oh, it got submitted 36 hours in advance. So I don't think
We had it 36 hours in advance. Okay. If as long as we had it 36 hours in advance.
We did. It
Okay.
was-
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that clarification.
No problem. And then, Madam Chair, do I need to suspend the rules to make the committee amendments?
Okay. I thought the amendments, thought you spoke that the amendments were on the committee. So the amendments were to the committee.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd really like to hear from, I understood we wanted to adopt the committee substitute, and then I thought we were going to have a chance to hear from the various speakers before we further amend the substitute. That's where I'd like to go, because I have some questions about if we're going to do it that way, I'd rather have the time to ask questions and see if these amendments are something I could support before we adopt them all.
Whatever you all are comfortable with.
Okay.
It's fine by me.
Okay. So what we'll do, we do have 3 stakeholders here that I can see in the room, but we also have someone that signed up from the community. So we'll let that person go first, be sworn in and go first, and then we will be able to ask questions from all the stakeholders after.
So I have Aaron Godwin in support of Board Bill 198. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, so if you could say your name and what ward you reside in. I have to swear you in. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you may proceed.
Hello. My name is Erin Godwin. I am a resident of the 7th Ward in the 2800 block of Arsenal Street, speaking today in support of Alderwoman Saulnier's Board Bill 198. I believe that residential or real estate developers should pay their fair share. I also personally feel it's wrong for the city to seize longtime neighbors' homes for being unable to pay comparatively small amounts of tax on their primary residence while continuing to reward developers who accumulate and become delinquent on immense tax liabilities. Had more to say, but there's no vote today, and I'm the only speaker, so I'm gonna thank you for your time and express my hope that perhaps in future we could also not rely on self-reporting from developers, or that I would hope that there is some sort of robust verification of that, if not now, in future, especially since in recent weeks there have been very disturbing news reports, specifically, right, not about developers, but about people blatantly disregarding public safety, health, and the rule of law, such as with the rental of, homes that did not have occupancy permits and, all of that. So yeah, I definitely have some concerns about self-reporting, especially as a long-term solution, but I think this is an excellent step in the right direction for accountability.
Thank you so much, Ms. Godwin. I always love to see members of the public come and engage in this process the way you did, and definitely your comments have been captured and will be shared. So appreciate you. I don't know if our Collector Greg Daly has any general comments he wants to make, or if he just wants to be available, and that goes for our SLDC representation as well prior to me for questions.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Greg Daly. I'm the Collector of Revenue for the City of St. Louis. With me this morning, I have Mark Stoff, who is the Chief of Staff for the Collector of Revenue. If I could, I'd like to take a point of personal privilege and just thank the Alderwoman from the 7th to including the Collector of Revenue into this legislation. I commend her, and I would suggest that if there is any type of legislation that comes up before the board, please contact our office. We'd like to participate. I've had over the years, I think things go a whole lot better if we can work things out beforehand instead of hashing them out in public, and we can just make sure that things are all on the right page. With regards to Board Bill 198, the Collector of Revenue stands in support of it. We are already in the process of checking on individuals, corporations. We do work for the comptroller, the Board of Election, SLDC. So this is something that is already in place. I think the substance of the bill itself, it just puts everybody on a level playing field. I think that if someone is going to do work for the city of St. Louis and receives incentives or benefits, I think that the city deserves to have their taxes paid and get everybody on a level playing field. I do believe that as a city, I think that people that want to do business here in the city, we're looking for good partners. Good partners pay their taxes. That's what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Collector Daly.
Okay, my pleasure.
Also, after our director Neil Richardson speaks, we do have one. I was told that we do have one person on Zoom from the community that would like to testify, Mr. Gerard Conley, if he can be brought up, panelist, or what he needs to do to be able to speak after Director Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee, for allowing SLDC to be present today. My name is Neil Richardson. I'm the president and CEO of the St. Louis Development Corporation. I also serve as executive director of our various development boards, of which related to this particular bill, LCRA, PIEA, or most affected and impacted by this. As Mr. Daly spoke to, we are also in support of the spirit of this bill of ensuring that we hold developers accountable, and that as we are working to grow economic development vitality within the city of St. Louis, that we are ensuring that we're working with good partners. And I think Mr. Daly stated it very well, that good partners pay their taxes that are due. And so as we've updated our development process in partnership with you, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, as well as Alderman Cone through the last board bill, I believe Board Bill 64, we agreed to develop a developer proposal report that would be shared with the Board of Aldermen, inclusive of some of the developer vetting that's done around previous projects that a developer has taken on, ensuring they have met the redevelopment agreements that we've executed, they've met the WMBE compliance, their goals on other projects. And I think this just adds an additional layer upon that through the developer vetting process. So we're comfortable understanding that and including that within our process. I think the question that and noted from Alderwoman Sanier is around the relationship between the Board of Aldermen and SLDC, the authority to direct versus advising. And so for SLDC, as part of Board Bill 64, we established resolutions among our SLDC board, our LCRA board, our PIEA, our TIF commissions, and our other development boards that adopted the process around presenting these developer proposal reports. And as part of this legislation, we are in agreement that we would like to adopt that this process within those boards, but not necessarily having it within the board bill itself. We need verification and confirmation for the city councilor's office, and the city councilor has agreed to provide that feedback to the Board of Aldermen within the next 24 to 48 hours, just to ensure that any legislation that's passed is enforceable. And if it's not, then if there's other resolutions that SODC can pass within our respective boards, we're more than willing to do so to support this effort. I do also want to make a statement around the overall process. So when a developer submits an application to SLDC, we do an intake form. We have now a new developer portal that lays out all of the projects that a developer has completed, has received incentives for in the past. We review the project. We put it through the community benefit scorecard that we have enacted. We then present that information to the LCRA board or the PIEA board or the Port Authority, whichever respective board they have applied to. And then that project goes before the board for a decision, whether to approve or deny that proposal. And then we move forward with, if approved, we move forward with presenting that information to the Board of Aldermen, in which they have to have a sponsor for the bill in order to move that redevelopment plan forward. Once there is a sponsor, they present the information, the developer proposal report, the community benefit scorecard, to the Board of Aldermen. It then goes for the first reading and then goes before the HUD's committee hearing, then goes through the legislative process before it comes back to our respective development boards, again, whether it's LCRA, PIEA, TIF committee, otherwise. From there, we then review the project with the developer. We ensure that we have any community benefit agreement, any other documentation that has been placed within the ordinance, incorporated within the redevelopment agreement itself. We then conduct our last verifications, and then I am then authorized as executive director of that development board to enter into that redevelopment. So we want to ensure that, there are a couple checkpoints through this process. The first is the application process. At that time, we are not activating any of the abatements. We're just reviewing the current status of the project, and then also the developer history with the city. The tax abatement will not be fully activated even after the redevelopment agreement is executed. The developer is then required to meet all obligations within the redevelopment agreement. And once we have confirmed all obligations have been met, we then send a letter over to the assessor's office to activate the abatement. So again, there has to be checks and balances. We want to ensure that, through this process, we check up front. We incorporate that information in developer proposal report, but then also before we activate the abatement, there also needs to be some verification to ensure that all taxes have been paid. What I would say for the developers out there, as they're working through many of these projects, sometimes they have some hair on it. Sometimes they inherit projects that have past due taxes, past due liens at the time in which they submit the application. We don't want to prevent them from submitting the application because the goal is for this redevelopment to ultimately address any current liens, any past due taxes. But many times they cannot get financing until they have their redevelopment agreement in place. So I think incorporating having a payment plan or some agreement with the collector of revenue is appropriate as well, because as it goes through that process of getting approval, getting the redevelopment agreement in place, and then getting the financing, then the developer will have the opportunity to pay off those past due taxes, pay off any liens through the process. And then before that abatement is actually activated in partnership again with the assessor's office, SLDC will conduct a CBI clearance to ensure that all past due taxes and liens are paid on that respective property prior to that abatement being activated. So there's a few checks and balances through the process that we have. So I just wanted to make it very clear that SLDC is in support. However, we have to ensure that any legislation that directs SLDC is enforceable, and if not, we need to make sure that we pass the appropriate resolutions across our boards. And so we look for direction from the city councilor's office to give that directive. So that's my statement for today, and I appreciate the time, and again, commend Alderwoman Sanye leadership.
Thank you so much for that. Is Mr. Conley available? Oh, I'm sorry. Connolly available to speak via Zoom?
Yes, I am available. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Can you turn your camera? Okay, there we go. And Madam Clerk will swear you in.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes. You may proceed.
Very good. Thank you very much, members of the HUD's committee, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I rise in support of Board Bill 198. As other speakers have already said, I think it's essential that real estate developers be held accountable regarding their tax payments, and being a good partner is paying your taxes to be a good partner is an essential role. I'd also would like the committee to look at provisions whereby the developers are held accountable once they have already obtained their tax abatement.
Mr. Conley?
Yeah, I'm afraid I've had something come up at my workplace here, so I will submit the rest of my comments in writing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Conley. Always good to hear from you. So let's go ahead and go forward with asking questions from the committee. I'll start with President Green. She indicated she has some questions for President Richardson.
Hello?
Thank you.
Okay.
It's hard
Good.
for me to tell. Director Richardson, are
Yeah.
you back up at the dais? It's
Okay.
with the slides still up. I can't I can't see virtually what it looks like.
You gotta disconnect.
I'm gonna assume that's a yes. All right.
Yes, they're working on it now, but you can go ahead. There we go.
Okay,
There we
thank
go.
you. I have a couple of just clarifying questions. Last year worked really close to your office on Board Bill 64, and it's my understanding that you have newfound concerns that the board cannot direct SLDC on activities. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, that was, again, guidance from the city council. She just wants to ensure that she has a chance to review this and provide the correct language to ensure that any legislation that's put forward is enforceable. And so we're just waiting for her to review the current bill as well as the committee substitute now and provide that feedback to Alderwoman Sanye. The city councilor did send an email over the weekend stating that provide a response by the end of the day on Wednesday. And so we expect over the next 24 to 48 hours, she would just give her final confidence and legal support on this legislation. So, she asked me to just wait before confirming that until she give her final response.
Okay, I appreciate that because looking back at Board Bill 64, I mean, there's at least a half dozen or more instances where that board bill directs SLDC to do things. It requires that SLDC consult with St. Louis Public Schools in their support or opposition to a proposal if it's over $1 million. It requires that SLD shall incorporate public input into development proposals that's gained from projects that are $10 million or more. It requires that SLDC provide a but-for analysis. So that, I mean, and it can go on and on kind of as you read through that bill. And so I guess my concern or my question is, if that is the new position that is being taken to negate Board Bill 64, or, did the city councilor give you any indication about why, the city councilor's office gave an affirmative of support on Board Bill 64 and didn't raise this as a challenge then, but is raising it now when the language is very similar to what was passed previously?
Yeah, so again, that was a question for the city councilor herself, and that's why I want to wait on her final opinion and perspective and input. But what I will say is, after this board bill was passed, Board Bill 64 was passed, President Green, SODC also adopted resolutions across all our various development boards to ensure that this was enforceable within the redevelopment agreements and all other proper channels within SODC and within our process and policies. Again, it's, even with this legislation, I need her support to say if it's enforceable or not through the legislation itself, but through our resolutions within our development boards. We took the act to ensure that it was memorialized and incorporated on our end. So in the event that it is not enforceable, we do have policies at SODC to ensure that it's enforceable from LCRA and our respective development boards itself in direction and support of that bill. So I think just getting her feedback and input would just give everyone comfort of understanding, is it clearly enforceable through the board bill, or is it enforceable at the development board level or collectively? So I think having our input and perspective is the best path forward.
Okay, I that. So just for clarity, should she come back with a difference of opinion from last year and say that the board does not in fact have this authority um, when we pass legislation to put parameters or around the work that you do, you're willing to follow that up with the proper procedures within SLDC
That's
through a
that's
passage of resolution to ensure that what we pass through the board is enforceable on your end as well.
That's correct. We would, again, review the legislation that is passed, and then work with our in-house counsel, which is the city councilor's office, on drafting resolutions that would adopt those processes and policies within our respective development boards.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. No further questions for me.
All right, thank you, President Green. Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Green asked some of the questions that I was going to. Glad that she's here. I do, just from a process perspective, Neil, can you maybe illuminate for us, like, how would this work in terms of verification of the tax payments? So, because oftentimes these developers utilize like different LLCs and things of that nature. Can you just walk us through how are we going to ensure compliance with the board bill?
Yeah, and that's some of the challenge. And again, I would defer also to Mr. Daly about, addressing the various LLCs, because as you know, many of these developers, they have different LLCs for every one of the development projects they move forward with. Sometimes they take on joint ventures and they may have partial ownership in a development project. From a developer vetting standpoint, what we're doing is if there is a developer, the parent company, we would review any project that we've had with that parent. So if the parent company if there's an LLC that submits the application, we would like to know what the parent company is. We would then, within that developer portal, have a list of all of the various projects that have been completed or requested tax abatement through SODC or respective development boards within that developer portal, so we can have a clear understanding of each project itself and the parent company and the status and how development was completed on those projects. But as it relates to understanding the liens and the past due taxes from a LLC as it's related to the parent company, I would like to defer to the collector of revenue, just because I don't have all of that information, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Sure. Mark Stoff, Chief of Staff, Collector of Revenue's Office. So typically what's going to happen, at least based on this legislation, is it's going to start with the developer and an affidavit presenting us with all of the entities that they are 20% is, I think 20% involved in addition to what they are submitting for abatement. And then what we'll do is we'll run that through our various systems: water, refuse, personal property, real estate. We have a data exchange program with the IRS, along with our own earnings tax system. We'll run that through there, verify that either taxes are paid or that they're not. In some of our systems, some of our processes, there are the ability to have payment plans. We'll make sure that they're current with those payment plans. And then if they are clear as far as we're concerned, we'll sign off on that.
So just for clarification purposes, if a developer is coming in using ABC LLC as the company that they're, applying for tax incentives, and then they go to the collector of revenue, they're representing company ABC LLC. You're asking them to sign an affidavit of whether or not ABC LLC has a 20% interest in any ownership interest in anything else.
I mean, that's my understanding of the legislation.
So, but if they have 123 LLC and, XYZ LLC, that affidavit, since they're signing on behalf of ABC LLC, wouldn't require them to disclose those ownership interests.
That's my understanding.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions, Alderman Cone?
None at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Alderwoman Spicer.
Thank you so much. I am glad that we're talking about this. I think this is a really important thing to discuss, and I agree that the spirit of the bill is definitely in the right place. And I have a few questions about just making it happen. I guess I should start with Mr. Richardson, if that's all right. You mentioned the various checkpoints that you have with developers when they're going through this process. At which checkpoint would you imagine this would fall in?
Again, up front, it's been presented in this bill. We can provide that information in the developer proposal report as of the current status of their existing projects, as well as the current project that's being proposed. And that information can be just transparent for the public to have and for the Board of Aldermen to have itself. However, as we move through the process overall and actually go to enter into the redevelopment agreement, sometimes when we enter into a redevelopment agreement, it takes maybe a year or even 2 years in some instances for development to take place. And so as that development is going through the process, before we issue that letter to the city assessor's office saying that we approve the activation of this tax abatement, we can also conduct a CBI clearance. So we conduct a CBI clearance with any small business that receives a grant or any other entity that receives a public benefit through SLDC if we receive any awards through the city. And we check with the license collector office to ensure that the business license is up to date, and then also with the collector of revenue to ensure they're on any past due taxes or those sort of things. So having that CBI clearance could be another way for us to provide just verification prior to sending a letter over to the city assessor to activate that abatement itself.
Okay, there's a few points, and this might be a good question for the sponsor, Alderman Sanya. Some of the things that the committee substitute talks about is the 7 days following receipt of notice, and they have 7 days to rectify it. I guess at what point? That's before they get the waiver from the collector's office.
Yes.
That's what you would anticipate that happening. Okay.
Yes.
So does that then shut down the entire development process if they're not able to get that waiver? Because it sounds like it wouldn't get to SLDC for presentation to us if they weren't able to get that waiver.
So it depends on the situation with the waiver. The committee substitute just puts language making the waiver a part of the process, and a lot of it will be up to the collector of revenue's office. But at that point, if it was found that for some reason they didn't have clearance, then it would be on the collector of revenue and SLDC to talk to the developer about what it looks like to bring them into compliance. So I think what
That's
you're
within 7.
Yeah, like at the 7 days, they have 7 days. Once they get notification, hey, we found you owe $10,000. I can't give you clearance. Here's what you have, and then there's a 7-day period for them. If they say, oh, this $10,000 is a tax lien, is a lien that was on the property before, they can follow up and submit that paperwork, or they can say, I do have this balance. I want to move forward with the project, though. Can we work something out? So but it will be, it's not specific in the legislation, but that's where that payment plan information and a good standing definition kicks in. And I intentionally didn't put that in there because I don't think it's, up to alders necessarily to legislate what that look like. I think that will have to be a conversation with the Collector of Revenue's office on, what the payment plan details look like. I'm just looking for them to show, we are a partner and we're operating in good faith. Even if we were to have this balance or whatever may come up, we're willing to work towards getting to a point of restoration.
Okay, I appreciate that. And that's all done before SLDC is given the clearance form.
Right. Ideally, they will go, when they first start, they want to do it, they will go to the Collector of Revenue's office and get this paperwork and submit it to SLDC when they fill out the rest of their application for whatever incentives they're seeking.
Okay, so at the very beginning, and then likely it would have to be checked again because 2 years have gone by. So we don't have that in the legislation that it would be checked again at a certain point, but that's might be where SLDC in their resolution would be talking about at what point they do checks to make the spirit of this may be a good question for you, Director. And maybe that's going too far in the enforcement of it, but when you, or sorry, President, right? Okay. I want to get that right. I apologize.
And I would say
That would
too
be-
that in reference to like where they are, since SLDC does not activate it until the end of the process, if there was a payment plan or anything that was worked into, SLDC and the Collector of Revenue's office can be in communication with each other before they actually activate the incentive to make sure that they have done, they've made their payments or done whatever they needed to do to show that they're on the right path. But I'll also let Mr. Richardson address that.
No, that's correct. It's just, again, one thing I want to ensure happens here is that the applications still come forward.
Right.
And that developers are not hesitant to submit the information and application for us to begin to assess the overall project, to start their community engagement process, to get the community involved, for us to score the project, understand what incentives they could qualify for, because that could impact the future development if they decide to go forward or not. So we want to make sure that we at least get the application, the information in. But before we would submit anything to the Board of Aldermen, within that developer proposal report, we can put in information that we received from the Collector of Revenue, just being transparent in the process. I think it's not upon us to say, yes or no. It's for us to provide the clear understanding of what's the status and what's the history of this developer itself. And that's what the developer proposal report is really about, is giving an overview of the project, but also giving the overview and the history of the developer in partnership with the city.
I appreciate that. Is that same process given to sort of the small businesses that are applying to grants, and how does that work if they're behind on their taxes?
Yeah, so we do a CBI clearance up front just to make sure that they have a valid license with the license collector office. If they have any past due taxes with the Collector of Revenue, we inform the applicant, hey, you're behind on your out of date on your license is expired, or you're behind on taxes with the Collector of Revenue. You need to get those things resolved before we can enter into any grant agreement. So it's not denying them the opportunity, but it's letting them know this is your status. And if this isn't cleared up, we cannot enter into a grant agreement with you because you do not meet the requirements of the city.
And in those cases, is there also, maybe this is a good question for the collector, but a payment plan allows them to qualify or no?
So that's a question for the.
It all depends on the situation, but traditionally, we get massive compliance when SLDC informs the taxpayer that they haven't paid, and magically those taxes all get paid up at one time.
Fantastic. Always.
So we anticipate a similar outcome with this process.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you very much. If they were to fall out of good standing in their paying of taxes during the time of their abatement, this is just at the application process, not throughout the receipt of incentives.
So for us, we don't have it, again, that currently within our redevelopment agreement. That's within the Collector of Revenue. That's within this as any other private owner, like a resident itself. If they're not paying taxes, That's something that they have to settle with the collector of revenue and get up to date on. We don't have a clause currently within our development agreement stating that if they are not up to date on their taxes, that we would rescind any tax abatement. That's not our current policy and process. Again, I think they should have to go through the same due process as any other property owner in the city, that if you're behind on your taxes, you have to get up to date, or there will be action taken by the city in order to ensure that we collect on the funds that are due to us.
And I think to your question, Ann, there may be something for us to explore there, like further conversation if there's a gap there. I think this was just like an original start of something that we know is not in place that can at least make sure that as we move forward, we are very aware of the status and position that our folks are in. But I would definitely say that doesn't mean that this is the end of the conversation. Mr. Richardson and Greg Daly have been great partners, so I'm sure they're open to Board Bill 64 was really the first of its kind. It's kind of historic, honestly. And so I think this builds upon it, but doesn't necessarily take us to the end goal of where we need to be. I think, for me, especially since filing the bill, I've gotten so many emails from people highlighting other things. Can you look at that? Can you look at this? So what I hope this does is shows, one, good collaboration and good consensus, and we all get to know we're moving in the right direction. And we're having, more equal accountability, that developers have the same standard as residents do, and opening up the door and allowing us to have these conversations and maybe discuss other gaps, and again, how we can work together collectively to address those other things.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. And I look forward to hearing the city councilors' opinions and how the wording should look in the bill. So appreciate you waiting to take that discussion up until after we get that feedback. So thanks for holding on that. That's it. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Alderman Browning.
Thank you, and thank you for taking this. Something that we were kind of practicing here in this current board, but I'm not sure every board has always been so on top of, and making it sure that we're making it a law so that we do it in the future, or God forbid, if we were ever to be replaced by some ne'er-do-wells, that they would have to actually follow it as well. I really appreciate Collector of the Revenue, Greg Daly, saying this simple statement: good partners pay their taxes. That's something that I think we should just say as much and often as we can, because what we're looking for in the city is good partners, right? We want to keep building in the city. We want to keep especially creating more housing, but also being able to draw more businesses and just grow. And we don't want to grow with anyone but a good partner. So we know that when we have a bad actor, it hurts our city in so many other ways. And this is just a good way to make sure that we're checking from the get-go. Hey, you're already have a track record of keeping up with the basic requirement of being a citizen in this city, which is to pay your taxes. So really appreciate that. I was curious how often, if you happen to know, how often does this happen where developers haven't paid their taxes and board bill in front of us from that is late on their taxes but asking for a tax abatement? Is that something you're aware of, or anyone SLDC maybe knows?
I don't say we have a current count, for example, aldermen, but I think this is what the spirit of this bill was aiming to accomplish, is to just be more transparent in the process of providing that information to the Board of Aldermen as you're making decisions on if this is a good partner or not. You have that information at your disposal to decide upon and make that assessment. And so our goal moving forward is to be able to be more transparent and with the process, and putting that information within the report that we.
Oh, thank you. I think, it doesn't need to happen too often for us to need to have a rule about it. We obviously don't want it to happen at all. I appreciate, Director Richardson, that you had noted that financing often depends on abatement being granted in that process. It's important that we remember that. We need to be clear about our expectations. And so once again, I think it's good to have a rule in place, because developers need to know what to expect as they're going through this process. is unfortunate when you enter negotiations and you feel like the goalposts keep moving. So we definitely want to be clear from the get-go. One thing I noted in the bill, just on a separate subject, and might need to put it in if we're revising this for next week, on page 3, line 1 through 4, it talks about applicants shall provide all necessary information to the Collector of Revenue's office in order to facilitate verification of tax status, including a complete listing of all real properties owned. It does not specify there that that would apply just to in the city. And I know it seems like a silly thing, but I think it might be necessary to just make sure that we're noting in the city, because I don't think we care if they don't pay their taxes out in the county. I mean, we do, but like we feasibly can't base our decisions off of that. So just one thing to note there. I also heard in a question earlier by one of my colleagues that this would only apply to the entity applying. So if it was ABC LLC, it would just be properties owned by ABC LLC and not by, say, the possibly hundreds of other LLCs that they own properties under. Is that correct?
I think the interest of all the information that they're submitting to the Collector of Revenues is hopefully, even if, and of course we can't force anyone, but hopefully if they're given those federal identification numbers and they're given all the information tags, then the Collector of Revenue can go and search through, especially with that software that connects to the IRS, and find leaking any LLCs that link to it. Of course, nothing is 100% proof, but I think, for me, the goal and the intent with the legislation is to make it so that, we're not just limited to what the developer may or may not provide, but that the Collector of Revenue has all the information they need to go and do additional research and validate and verify what has been provided to them, and that is the full picture.
Okay. Just making sure. I think we'll also have another piece of legislation that we're kind of coming down the line where we're going to try to have a better idea of how to connect all the LLCs that people own in the city and kind of pierce that corporate veil so that we can take care of our city better. So looking forward to that as well. So all in all, very supportive of the idea of this bill, and want to make sure that we just get it to a point where we know it's going to be enforceable and workable. And so again, want to thank you for bringing it forward, and look forward to getting to a place where we can make this law.
Thank you.
All right. Did anyone else have any additional online or hear any afterthoughts?
No, that's all.
Okay. All right. You're welcome to close.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I just really want to thank, first and foremost, residents and constituents. When I've been talking about legislation I'm working on, this is one where in every room, people clap. And for me, I've seen instances where we've had residents that have lost homes for $1,000 or less. So I think that the standards need to be fair, that, if we have residents in our home that are losing their homes in the city, then we want to make sure that everybody is held to the same standard, that all of us are playing by the same system and have the same rules. And also, I think it's really important for us as alders that it's not just on us, that it's not on us individually to be the one with each incentive, each TIF, each abatement to draw our standards and say that's what the case. So my interest in the legislation is really making sure that, there's transparency, that everyone in our city, whether you live here or want to business here, cast the same standards, and also that it's not just on alders or just on SLDC, but that this standard is clear across the board and doesn't catch anyone, off guard. So with that, I just, I look forward. I will get you all that. I think some of you have said you prefer just an additional committee substitute with some feedback from the city councilor. So I think I will just hold off on my amendments for now, but want to make sure that you all know that the thing that we're discussing is how do you make sure this is a standard and that the language is compliant with what's enforceable and what we have the authority over in our legislation process. So I'll make sure as soon as I get that feedback from the city councilor relatively soon that you guys get an updated committee substitute, and next week, hopefully we'll be ready to take a vote.
All righty. Thank you, Vice Chair Sanye. With that, we'll move ahead. Any written testimony?
We have 4 in support of Board Bill 198.
Okay, great. Any announcements? I think we'll just reiterate the opportunity to engage in the SLOOP process tonight, engage public engagement at Mission St. Louis from 5 to 7. And then if you haven't had your fill with that, you can engage from 7 to 8:30 at the History Museum for the public hearing for the Charter Commission. We were all present, so we don't need any excused members. I'll accept the motion for adjournment.
Second. Previous roll.
Previous row, we are adjourned. Everyone have a blessed day.